Thanks, Chandun. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for making time to attend this session of the Sundowner sessions. So just a little background for people who may not know why we call it Sundowner session. People sometimes say, isn't that the name of a cocktail? Maybe. But the reason why we call it Sundowner sessions is because this whole endeavor was really about creating a community platform for people who are related to the science community to talk about the issues that they're facing as a result of um, the whole COVID experience that we're all undergoing at the moment, and to create a community really and talk about the things that are bothering many people at this point in time. So it comes under the wellness heading, more or less. The reason why we call it the Sundowner session is we kind of realize that there's a time in the day, usually this time, when the day is ending and the evening is beginning, and then when it's becoming night, there is a certain kind of uneasiness and a certain kind of heaviness that descends upon many of us. And it just felt like a good idea to have something happening at this point of time in the day that kept us engaged and in conversation with other people, so things didn't feel as bad as they would otherwise. Anyway, without any further ado, let me very quickly welcome our three guests today. We have Mr. Kollegala Sharma. I'm not going to say his full name. Um, we have Dr. Karishma Kaushik, and we have Professor Ramanujam. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about these very esteemed guests that we have with us. So Professor Ramanujam is a professor of theoretical computer science at the Institute of Mathematical Sciences in Chennai. The reason he's here is because he's really interested in science education and popularization of science. We have Karishma Kaushik, and she's a physician, a clinical microbiologist, a scientist, an advocate for women in science, yes, and a science enthusiast. And she's looking, she's got a very interesting science engagement that she runs, and really looking forward to hearing more about that, and hoping that we will get to work with her as well. And last but not least, my friend, Mr. Kollegala Sharma from the CFTRI in Mysore. He has published over 1,600 popular science articles in Kannada and English, 155 radio drama scripts for radio serials. He has trained writers, artists, and technical personnel. And he also runs an extremely popular science communication program called Janasuddhi, which has, if I'm not wrong, Mr. Sharma, about once a week to more than 1,000 people. Correct me about my numbers, but these are our people, and that's why they are so important to have with us today. So I'm really happy to have all of you. I'm going to ask you all to speak a little bit about your engagement, just to let everybody else know, and then we will just get into chatting about what's it been like for you this time, and how you've been coping. So let's just start with Mr. Sharma. Could you unmute yourself, Mr. Sharma? You're muted.
Thank you, Mahin. So should I start with my name? So it is Ambalai Srikantan Kalyana Venkata Subramanya Sharma. Okay. So because people people don't remember it so easily, I have shortened it as Kollegala Sharma, and that is what people know me about. Okay. The second thing is, the Janasuddhi is now a daily affair. So every day for 10 minutes, a science topic will be discussed in that, or rather it will be, it is not a discussion in the usual sense of the podcast that we listen to usually. It is a sort of a digest in Kannada about some research that has happened maybe within the past 1 week. And there will be a few things that will be of general interest also, like a biography on a Wednesday, or about an element, some interesting things about elements on Friday. So this is what I do. And I have been in science communication field for the past almost 40 years from my student days. So what I have been doing is something, this is a day when I have to introspect, especially in the backdrop of COVID-19. And I will come to that over the discussions when we have discussions. There are lots of things that we started doing when COVID happened. The first one was some of us got together and started talking about this. Janasuddhi carried about 8 episodes exclusively on COVID. And it started even before the other newspapers or media took it up. So because we were talking straight away from the research journals and all, the moment something is published in a research journal, we start talking about that. And a podcast gives me an advantage in that I don't have to wait for the other processes. If something has appeared today and it is something has been published today and it is of urgency, then I can sit for a 1 hour or 2 hour and prepare a script, record it, and then send it to all my audience same day. And this has happened. Say, for example, last week we had um, the NASA publication, and it was carried yesterday. So something that was published in Friday and appearing in Kannada within a short span of time, this is what Janasuddhi is doing. But then the advantage of this also means that we had to look at what kind of media we are using and how best we can use, and how everything changed in the COVID times. For example, many of the newspapers which used to publish science articles don't have space for science now, mainly because they them. Yeah.
Mr. Sharma, I'm going to stop you. I don't want you to tell us
Sure.
all the meaty stuff right now. You
Okay.
just tell us about Janasuddhi. I'm going to talk to you about this later. We're going to discuss
Sure.
it with everybody. But thanks so much. Can I now move on to Karishma? Dr. Kaushik, please. You're muted.
Unmute and I should share screen. Can you see my screen? All right. So yes. Okay. So with a member of my research group, we used lockdown to spearhead an outreach platform that we've been thinking about for a very long time. But to be honest, with kids not at home and we in the lab, it just didn't happen. The pandemic, ironically, turned out to be the perfect time for this, you know. I hate to put it that way. But we are a webinar for kids. So every week on Monday at 5 o'clock, we have this interactive platform where 40 to 50 young minds, 6 to 16 years, join us. We choose one science topic. Of course, we started with COVID-19, and we've expanded since then to biofilms, antibiotics, microbes in food. And in our current season, we even have guest speakers. So I think the USP of our platform is that it's very interactive, and scientists actually answer questions from our young minds. So it's taken off, and we've had a very, very good response. So I'll stop share now. Great.
Thanks so much, Karishma. Like I was mentioning to you earlier, we're so keen on hearing more about that, because anything to do with kids now is really important, you know, them not being able to go to school and all that.
Yes.
But we're really keen.
Mahin, I have lost you.
Yeah, I also
work
lost
with you, and I really think it's a great time. I'm sorry, this is a great time to collaborate. So we're looking forward to possibility.
Absolutely, sure.
I'm going to ask Mr. Ramanujan to go next. Professor Ramanujan, tell us about your engagement.
I'm involved in science communication for quite a long time, I think, almost 30 years now. So I've been writing principally in Tamil, science in Tamil, quite a bit for children. I'm editor of this magazine called Thulir, which is a science magazine for children that published by Tamil Nadu Science Forum. It's a monthly magazine. So over 33 years, we've been producing once a month. So there's been plenty of material for children, and publishing books and interaction with scientists and the whole works with children and school teachers. So it's been going on for a long time. But in particular, in the context of COVID, what I would like to mention is my involvement with the Indian scientists' response to COVID-19, the ISRC group. So let me just show the website of the group. So this is insicov.in, and you will see Arnav of TIFR who gave a webinar on Sunday. So this is we have it's an eclectic group that has come together at the time of this pandemic to respond to the crisis from pretty much all the scientific institutions and universities and colleges and teachers, students, and putting together material for the general public and for people interested in modeling and data analysis and so on. So yeah, so do take a look at the site, and that will also tell us a little bit about what we are doing during the pandemic. I can get into more details after during the discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, all three of you. In fact, if you have links to any of your science engagement, you can just put it in the chat window so all our attendees have access to it and they can check it out later. I just want to tell everybody, if you hear a pressure cooker going off in the background, this is a side effect of working from home. So please excuse that, okay? Okay, so I'm going to actually kick off this entire discussion. I'm really excited because, you know, we had a follow-up, we had a preparation discussion before we had this call. And just in that discussion, we just talked about so many different things. So I'm really keen to have this. One of the things I think, Ms. Sharma, that you touched upon was the idea of how your engagement has been affected by COVID, and what has happened, or how has it been affected, and what did you then, let's start with that. How was it affected?
We usually think of, you know, when we talk about any public engagement, especially in a large scale, one of the best media that we usually rely upon is the print media. Unfortunately, what happened during this COVID is that both the print media, because of the lockdown and other things, not only were they affected by lockdown, but their space also reduced. Even otherwise, space for science is very little in these media. So this was one of the problem. And second thing we noticed was that, you know, they wanted information, but they didn't have the space. So this was some challenge that we encountered. These days, I don't usually contribute to the print media, but what happened was we got together, a couple of us, and what we did was to first talk about the COVID and the Corona and all these aspects on Jana Suddhi, that is the podcast that I produce every day, and then put together the same scripts into a book form. We published an ebook. Interestingly, the ebook and also an audio book. So one of the things that we noticed was more than the ebook, the audio files were the ones which were downloaded more, almost twice the number. So it might come to roughly around 500, and that's the number. And this was something that was very interesting. People don't have time to read, but they look at information. They want the information, and they look for every media that is available. The second thing that happened was, when the newspapers were short of space, we told them that we will give you 150 words each day about Corona. For 40 days non-stop, one newspaper published this. It was so popular, just 150 words. And what we did was, instead of telling everything about this, we took one word and just explained what that word means. So this will carry a lot of information. And also, it used to give them a sort of a knowledge that was required. So, for example, what is why do we call SARS-CoV-2? How did that name come about? Why Corona? Okay, all these things every day. And the four of us, we used to discuss what word we have to discuss, and then prepare a comprehensive 150 word this one. And it went under the name of Srinidhi, who is a very well-known tech writer in Karnataka. So a tech writer and a popular science communicator like me and a physician, we joined together and published this. And the whole thing was also put together into an ebook again.
Just a thing
Yeah.
I want to ask you. So you're saying that both the content as well as the platform changed for you.
Yeah.
You continue doing the podcast, but then you also thought of making an ebook.
Yes.
Right. And also in terms of content, there was a change because you found that now you could, let's say, focus directly on COVID. And I thought what you did was really interesting because you decided to not just publish more articles because there was already a glut of content in the media, right?
Yeah,
so you decided
exactly.
to add a glossary of terms,
Yeah.
which I think that's amazing. Sometimes the simplest ideas make great science engagement, right?
Yeah, and this was very popular, and that's what our learning was. So instead of giving a lot of information, maybe one small information that is of interest should be communicated.
Yeah, that's I think an amazing thought. Yeah, so you focus on one thing as opposed to the entire engagement.
Exactly.
So that's a great thought. What about you, Professor Ramanujam? What about you, Dr. Kaushik? What have you learned from this? I mean, how is this? I think with Dr. Kaushik, you came about your engagement during the time of COVID, right? So
So on March 1st, I told Snehal in my research group that we should use the summer when I'm not teaching to go around to schools in Pune and disseminate science, our science and topics of interest. March 15th onwards, we've been out of the lab. So the idea that you can reach out to 6 to 16-year-olds through a webinar was something that only this pandemic and lockdown and staying away from the lab opened up. And now we actually have a situation where they keep track of the next webinar, the link, they log in, So with kids being so tech savvy now, this might actually be a much more effective and enabling way to communicate, through the online interface as opposed to going to schools. Of course, your audience and your reach would be different in every situation, but pandemic taught me that kids can be reached out through webinars.
Yeah. If anything, I think that it's been easier to reach out to kids. We've recently started off an ecology Sunday session. It was crazy. We had like 77 kids on a Sunday morning, which is insane. We would never have had that otherwise. So yeah, I mean, there are this is the bright side, I think, of everything that's been happening. But tell me, so you're saying that your entire engagement very sort of incidentally happened to happen during this time. You were just looking at doing an engagement, but you found yourself having to find a new platform for it.
Completely, and we also, being away from the lab, found a little mind space to invest in it. And the children will also mind over many things. Even the children were at home. This again became a big factor. They were not in school. They were not dealing with the everyday homework, schedule, classes. So it just, in the middle of pandemic chaos, it all came together. That's all I can say.
Yeah, like a happy accident. No, that's great. That's
exactly.
What about you, Professor Ramanujam? Tell me a little bit about your
you've
been working on this website, haven't you?
Yeah, I think for me, this is completely the opposite, because I have only worked in the print media all my life in terms of writing for children. It has always been through physical interaction in with teachers, with children, writing in Tolir and our Tamil Nadu Science Forum's other media, which is all print media. So the disruption is total. And Tulir's circulation is about 50,000, of which annual subscription is just about 15,000. So the large number is reaching to rural areas, to children who, groups of children buy Tulir together. So that is the kind of groups that we are talking about. Our entire reach has always been, it has been to reach them. So for that, the disruption has been total. So we try to, Tulir is now published online through, and PDFs which are sent through phones, but the reach is cut down enormously. As far as ISRC is concerned, that is the other one that I mentioned, which it was a conscious thing as you are out of your lab, people, there are all these scientists, while medical professional and people who work on drugs and vaccines can continue to do. What about the others? What shall we do? So the idea was, it was a voluntary group that came together. Mainly, first thing was the human misinformation going around, address that, and address science communication, because the huge need, and we see it right now, about people wearing masks or, not knowing how to wear masks, or somebody saying hand washing, but what is it about? That there is something, a 3,000 base pairs configuration of molecules terrorizing everyone. Why should terrorize? So there is a huge question. So science communication and hoax busting, as we call it, that have been the thing with that non-handing data. Some kind of scientific interpretation for the public is needed. Because on one hand, there is all data and government decisions, but you need to actually understand the data in a way that they can be communicated to people. So this is what I've been working with. The work that I mentioned with Tulir and this, that goes on, but the reach is cut down enormously. We do have interaction with children, but that's a very different audience, where it is certainly there is reaction that you can see. But
I'm losing your voice. I don't know if everybody else is also facing that. Your voice is kind of cutting out. So maybe you can switch off your video and just continue speaking so we can get the entirety of what you're saying.
That would be just fine. And now?
Okay, great. Yeah.
Should I continue or go over it again? Or I don't know
Waiting.
what got lost.
No, no, please go ahead.
Yeah, no. So what I was saying was that as far as that reach that was there before, I mean, this is a huge disruption. I mean, that has been completely cut off. But a different set, yeah, you know, in terms of this Indian scientist group working together and producing material, yes, that goes on. And probably this material is reaching a large set of people. We have WhatsApp groups. You know, all this is produced in Indian languages and put out through the social media. So it is reaching some thousands, but you know, the number is still in thousands. You know, we are talking a very small section relative to what we would like to reach. That's what.
I really want to ask this question. I mean, as all of you are primarily scientists and not science communicators, right? And this is not like your full-time job, like it's my full-time job, right? So how has this entire pandemic really affected the role that you play as science communicators or in the science communication sphere? Have you felt that you've been, in a sense, called upon to play a more active role in the information that you disseminate? Or do you feel like as a result of this pandemic, you really had to take a bit of a backseat? What's it been like for you?
Shall I go? Or yeah, okay. I think it's a matter of social responsibility, right? And in general, you know, I would say science communication should be seen as one of the roles of scientists. But in our country, it's not formally a role that is even acknowledged in general. But when it comes to a situation like this, when it comes to a pandemic like this, it's different from floods and cyclones, right? It's something that cultures have experiences of. I mean, tsunami was a hit, I must say, that was new, but cyclones people have known all along. This virus, people have known contagion. It's not that they have not known contagion. People have, you know, there are people with living memory of dealing with smallpox. But overall, understanding something like this, RNA-based virus and how it is affecting and what it means for infection, understanding this is a huge problem. So in terms of communicating with the public, who is the public? You know, who do you have in mind, right? And how does that person understand? I think we have to look at it from that point of view. And then I think scientists have a very critical role to play in explaining the science that is involved and more about what is happening in your life. Yeah.
I actually have, yeah, I'm actually going to ask you more questions about that, but I think you want to say something, Karishma.
So one thing I think I struggled with and a lot of scientists struggle with is finding impact for our work. You know, all right, we all write these. All right, okay. So we are reading each other's minds.
Go ahead.
So we propose that we are going to turn the field on its head. We are going to discover this new interaction, this new target. But how many of us really get to see that in our own lifetime, you know? Unfortunately, a lot of us get left with, okay, we published, we presented, we made an incremental advance. I have been struggling myself to find impact through my research, and outreach has provided this opportunity. So I think it's two ways, you know. The scientist also gains tremendously by offering time and input in this venture. So I would never like to think of it as a charity to society. It's really even beneficial to the scientist and their team.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a two-way benefit that we usually find. But one question that Dr. Ramanujam asked is very relevant here. Who are our audience? Who are our audience? Is it our scientists, general public, children? And there was a very interesting thing that happened. So I take the liberty here to talk about a personal thing that happened to me. I became a very popular I have been writing for almost 40 years, but I was never popular like I happened to be during the corona this one. This is a slip of paper that was circulated through WhatsApp, through almost all social media, saying that in 1989, somebody talked about coronavirus. What you see here is the coronavirus. Okay. And the fortunate or unfortunate thing that happened was the article was written by me in 1989 when you know, there was a challenge like this, the same way that we are discussing today. I had a discussion with an editor of a journal, And when he said that, the science, usually the popular science, it doesn't deal with the routine things that we have. And there is nothing interesting in science. So I told him, there is a lot of interesting things even in common cold. And I wrote an article on common cold, and it was very new that the coronavirus had been discovered 1967, and it was just about 22 years, and it was not in the know-how then. And we also didn't know that, the viruses, except for one or two viruses, these coronaviruses can jump from, animals to humans. So this was not yet known at that time. It came about afterwards, okay? But I had mentioned in my article that the coronavirus and the photograph of that. And this piece went around a lot. And, there were lots of newspaper articles about one scientist has discovered this much before anybody knew about that. So I got all the credit for not doing anything. Okay. Now, the question that even when I said, no, I have not predicted a coronavirus epidemic, I have not predicted anything, people were not ready to believe. Simply that the climate was a scary climate, and people there was only one thing in their mind: corona. And anything that you talk about corona was immediately picked up. So this is something that we need to, as science communicators, look at things, because if in a climate like this, how do we communicate? Whatever we say might be scary. Whatever we say might not be taken the way that we want to them to understand. And this is something that happened not just once, several times during this.
Mr. Sharma, actually, it's very interesting that you say this, because I think probably in the beginning of this whole experience with the pandemic, we wanted to just get our hands on any information we possibly could. I mean, information gives us a sense of power, gives us a sense of knowing, right? You feel like you have this false sense of having control over your life. And as communicators, and that's what we are here to do, right? Inform people to the best of our ability. Now we're about 3 months into this. Do you feel like some of the interest is kind of waning? Do you feel like, people are, do they still want to hear about the pandemic? Do they still want to hear about corona? Or is it time now to, I think, reintroduce regular science, so to speak, into the conversation and kind of bring people, back into mainstream science conversations? What would you say?
I think that is absolutely necessary now, at least because it is like a sort of a sort of a burden now that we are talking so much about corona, so much about COVID and all. People, maybe they have a fatigue also. We don't know, or maybe they are scared. I'm not sure. But then we need to have a little bit of change. But then the responsibility of a science communicator also rests in that the epidemic is not yet over. Okay, the pandemic is not yet over. There are things that are coming in, and this also has to be communicated. So how do we do this without scaring people? And is there a different mode that we have to adopt so that we engage them in a very, not a scary way, in a not frightening way, but at least engage them in such a way that, they get to understand what is happening around them.
So, Mr. Sharma, yeah, I'm going to come to you in just a second, Karishma. Mr. Sharma, it's, again, what you said again leads me to saying this. I think that as science communicators, and I'm going to put this out there and we can discuss this, but I think as science communicators, we all have the responsibility to kind of navigate the conversation in a certain direction. The news and the press is going to do whatever they need to do, right? But as communicators, we have, I think, the power to bring a certain kind of influence to the conversations that are happening around COVID or any other science that's happening. So while, Mr. Sharma, you were saying something about how people are, we're still in the midst of the pandemic, we still have a long way to go. Certainly do. What is it that we can bring into the conversation that can help, combat misinformation? As Professor Ramanujam said earlier, can bust myths or tackle hoaxes. A little later on in the conversation, I'm going to bring up what I call the beast that is India in the conversation, and we're going to discuss this as well. Karishma, you had to say something?
Yes, I was just to take on both your points. I think we should absolutely for want of a better word, ride this wave of this renewed interest in science. And someone asked me, or we're talking of science communication, what's going to happen after COVID? I don't think India has a shortage of science issues or health problems to be discussed. We can certainly go in, why not have this similar communication and outreach for tuberculosis, malaria, dengue, kala azar, filariasis, neglected tropical diseases? And I'm biased because I'm an infectious disease specialist. But there are so many problems that we can discuss. If anything, this has helped us interface with the public better about these complex issues. So we should only take off from here, you know.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is exactly what I was kind of moving towards, which is that now we've kind of built up a certain momentum. And it's not to say that we didn't have momentum before, but, you know, we really have kind of hit the ground running recently, right? And as Mr. Sharma has said, he's found a whole bunch of new takers and a brand new audience for his Scicomm. We're coming up with different kinds of initiatives, of course, all online, but different kinds of initiatives that are now, you know, being more topical focused, more audience specific. When I say audience specific, I'm saying, for example, non-English language speakers. And this is a great time to springboard, I think. You've got your audience is captive. This is a fantastic time when we talk about other things. And I don't know, Karishma, whether all we want to talk about is problems. I mean, I think you can use this opportunity to talk about the great research that's coming out of the country, or the kind of COVID testing efforts that are going on over here, or a number of different things that are happening as well.
Absolutely, Mahini. Even wastewater management to, you know, eco-friendly initiatives to everything that can interface with science in some form and impact lives. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm going to just interject this into this. Shrestha Rath, who's a participant in today's session, is saying, I totally echo what Dr. Kaushik said about Scicomm by scientists being a two-way influence. I agree with that. As a young science undergraduate, I'm formally training in biology, and I'm also trying to learn communicating science without bias. I look forward to communicating the science I would do in future. And Shrestha is asking, what would be the best way to engage in Scicomm as a newcomer to this field? What would you say? Mr. Sharma, do you want to take this? Or Professor Ramanujam, do you want to take this?
Yeah, the best is to start talking to the family. Yeah, this is what every science communicator says, but it's not so easy. And COVID has taught me a lot of lessons in this also. Say, for example, okay, when we had this Tablighi episode, okay, it went around a lot saying that everywhere the infection is mainly because of Tablighis. And to get this feeling out of the minds of the people has been very, very, very difficult, including in my family. I come from a Brahmanistic family. Okay, so recent days there have been several movements where these people gather together in small groups and discuss about the beliefs, faith, and things like that. Even in those places where this information is fed in such a way, and I need to learn from them that how to actually encapsulate the information that we need to give, or the knowledge that we need to give, in such a influential way that my sisters and parents, they still believe that it is because of the Tablighis. It's very terrible. And coming from a small place where we all live together, door to door, we had neighbors from the other communities and all. It is terrible. It is really terrible. And it is difficult to communicate and convince them that this is something different. And the epidemiology of this pandemic is something that doesn't respect or give a hoot to any religion or any community or any person. Very, very difficult.
Yeah, no, it's completely non-discriminatory. I agree with you. So I think that was a great piece of advice that you gave, Mr. Sharma. So yes, talk to your family. I think we can stretch it by saying, talk to your immediate environment and figure out what it is that they're thinking. Get a sense of what people are thinking. And I think another thing that, in fact, Professor Ramanujam is doing is focusing a lot also on myth busting, right? Which is, I think, is truly essential, especially in a country like ours. Did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, before that, I would also like to add to what Dr. Sharma was saying, that as an undergraduate student, I'm interested in science. I want to communicate science. What should I do? I would say write science, talk science, because all of us have no interest of that in our classrooms. our schools we do not talk science. We do this ever, and I think yeah, maybe I'll stop video in case. Yeah. So I think we don't have much experience in actually discussing science. That's common. We don't have much experience in writing science, and writing science is not very easy. We're used to answering questions asked by us, right? Exam mode is what we are most used to. Moving away from that, taking a topic in science and make it a point of discussion, right? Which means problematizing it, understanding it is not easy at all, because we have always been taught that there are very clear answers in science which are available in the book. You learn that, reproduce that. That's your job as learning. As a student in science, that's how we all learn.
Okay, so to paraphrase what you're saying, and please let me know if I'm wrong, you're saying that we need to make science more of a conversation topic, as opposed to something that is just, right. So it's not just something that needs to be a classroom discussion.
About.
Right.
That you can have differences of opinion in science, right? In mathematics, by the way, you can have differences of opinion. You can argue, you can debate. And the social nature of these things is not something that we are used to at all. So I would tell her, please, get into that, debate it. In fact, I hope, colleges will have debating clubs for science as well, right?
Well,
so public speaking on why is the sky blue, right? So, and I'm mentioning that because C.V. Raman actually gave a public lecture on why is the sky blue. Right? So we could think of doing questions like that. So, and that brings to the other question that you raised about myths, and there is, there are all kinds of myths around, right? Misconceptions around, superstitions around. And I think it's also important to realize that all of us carry various misconceptions. All of us carry, what somebody might refer to as false beliefs, because you have no idea, because it's a belief and you don't know what is right and what's wrong. The problem is that we are not used to evidence-based reasoning in public discourse. Most of invariably into, I think, so it is right. It's my experience, it is right. Not any data points you have, whether your experience replicable for every past, in the case of some medicine, for every positive experience you had, how many negative experiences you had. So we're not used to that style of thing at all. That has been one important thing. On one hand, with tension, political agenda, confronting them is one particular. Another is simply misconceptions, right? I mean, one very common thing in our society is mosquitoes carrying all kinds of problems. We are used to malaria, dengue, we're used to all of these. And those are huge realities in Indian conditions. So a lot of people are worried about malarias and flies carrying coronavirus. Do they spread COVID-19? Here's a matter of science communication to point out that this is nothing to do with mosquitoes and flies, right? Mosquitoes are waiting for you anyway, the monsoon coming, and you have a problem waiting for you, but that has nothing to do with coronavirus. So we found that in terms of looking at misconceptions of people, we have a range of issues to address, and each of them we have to look at very carefully, and most importantly, the process of using scientific evidence, right? Especially when scientific evidence is changing in its own. I mean, who has changed its tune on a couple of things, right? So in terms of is it transmitted in the aerial route or not? So there are a lot of discussions that are going on. So it's been a very important thing to update, to keep taking a look at it again and again and explaining the science, and always keep in mind where, and one more thing, most of those misconceptions and hoaxes have a grain of truth somewhere, and you have to hold on to that. You have to point to that, because people don't, I mean, there is always some grain of truth that leads to the belief. So addressing that, and then going over to the layers of falsity surrounding it, unpeeling those layers, and coming to what is the actual science that you understand, and keeping in mind that it is a dialogue, it's going to go on, because more papers will be written as we understand this whole SARS-CoV-2 better, its treatment better. We'll also be able to say things better, but that is the process of science. So somehow communicating that process of science and evidence-based discussion, I would say, is the chat, is the main thing.
Karishma has been waiting to say something for a really long time.
So I think a lot of, when we scientists talk about how to become communicators, we focus very heavily on the science, Mahin. But I think essentially is communication. You need to have a captive audience, for which you need the skills, at least depending on the language you choose to communicate in. You need to be able to write well in that language, and you need to be able to speak well. And in this current era, you need to be able to face a camera. I mean, none of us imagined we would be facing a camera in any capacity in our professional work. So I would tell Shrestha and others interested in this is try and look at some reading, writing, and speaking courses. Develop these skills. The last thing you want is to have all the science but not have the communication skills, right? And a lot of this pivot to communication we've seen in 3 months has been everyone knows the science, but I don't think they're able to keep the audience gripped into what they want to tell them.
Absolutely true. You know, I don't know if everyone here has heard about this writer called Allen Ginsberg, and you know he said this very interesting thing was, you know, you have to learn to kill your darlings, and what that means is that, you know, as scientists, not me, I'm not a scientist, but as scientists I find that, you know, we tend to get very enamored of our own ideas and very enamored of our own science, and somewhere along the way we forget that there is an audience. That audience is not just 50% of this conversation. That audience is like 90% of that conversation. 10% is your content, but 90% is, do you have an audience? Is this audience open to listening to us? What is it that I can say or do to make this audience interested in what I have to say? Because it is important at the end of the day. Exactly. Never mind that I'm the communicator. So the communicator really essentially needs to take a back seat in this whole thing. And I think that we don't always do that, which kind of works against us. I want to take this opportunity, since we've been talking about this, to deal with this subject. You know, when we had this conversation about how doing science communication in India is very different from doing science communication anywhere in the world. And we can say that with a fair amount of confidence because we have so many things that are so unique to this country that we live in. I mean, if you have a different kind of rice every 100 kilometers that you move. You know, you have languages that are dying by the day. This is the breadth and the depth of the kind of tradition and society and culture that we live in. As a result of which, of course, there is the flip side, which is that, you know, we also are talking, and this is something that Professor Ramanujam, you brought up in our last conversation, where you talked about a lot of the science communication that we do today is catering to an urban population, right? Right now we're doing a Zoom call, right? And we have to be very clear over here and face the facts and how many people in our non-urban settings do have access to Zoom calls. Secondly, this entire conversation is happening in English. How many people have access to that language to understand the complexities of what we're discussing? So we have all of these things to work with. I really want to get your take on this. And of course, I really want to hear from Mr. Sharma, because this is a thrust that he works very closely on and he's very passionate about. But I want to start with you, Karishma.
This is absolutely an issue, Mahin. Even our platform reaches out to urban kids who have access to Zoom settings where they can sit for 1 hour and it's all in English. So maybe we need to structure science communication better, you know, rather than this be driven so much by individual passion, effort, you know, and drive. Maybe our organizations can help us do this in multiple languages. One thing this pandemic has also shown that all our institutes, organizations, and funding bodies need proper communication and outreach divisions. This is not just having a Twitter page. So for someone like me, I can't speak every language in India. I can speak maybe 2 or 3. If I could team up with an institute that's ready to help me, we can take this forward. As long as it's an individual effort, we will always go towards audiences we are comfortable with. I mean, what other choice do we have?
The COVID-Gyan website, of which Sundowner Sessions is a part, tries very hard to focus on making sure that the content that we put out also has bilingual, trilingual functions. And I think that Professor Ramanujam, the website that you're working on also, you have put quite a lot of effort into ensuring that it is to a large extent multilingual. Again, while I think the effort is commendable, I have to again ask, how many people are we reaching with this? Given the paucity of internet connectivity, electricity connectivity in our rural areas. And these are people who live very far away from urban centers. How are we going to get the information that we need to get to them in ways that, when they don't have the means to access our ways? Mr. Sharma?
Can I say something? No? Yeah,
I think Mr. Sharma, say something? Mr. Sharma, did you want to say something?
Yeah, okay. So this is a question that each of us have been asking for almost decades and decades. Okay, even we thought the print media will be enough, and then we thought the television will be the next, boon for us, and then we thought that the social media will be helping us, internet will be helping us, and still we feel ourselves, very short of whatever we have been doing. My take is that use all media wherever it is possible. So that's one. But the challenge is each media demands a different kind of approach, and that one has to be very well versed with. Otherwise, it is not easy, because when I write for a print media, it will be different, and when I write the same script for a audio media, it should be different. And because the engagement, the type of engagement that we will have is totally different, and that's one. And the best take is if we can go to the people, talk to them wherever they are in any setting. That should be one. And we should not actually make this as a movement. See, like Karishma said, yes, almost every institute is now doing everything possible with corona and COVID. Okay, and it's sometimes it feels like everybody is working only on this and nothing else. That's one. Secondly, we also should be aware of other influences that will always affect our, the communication efforts. One example that I can give you is we have been, like Dr. Ramanujam said, the quick changing discoveries. Okay, the discoveries are happening every other day. New information is coming in, and then the old information is passed off. But what happens in the social media today is the old information is recirculated several times. So we will have to keep on talking about the same thing. This has happened to me several times about this corona, the slip that I showed you. And we had another interesting thing that happened, because recently we distributed some spirulina based candies to people who are the migrant laborers, because we thought that that was a food that CFTRI prepared, and we thought that that will help them at least to pass off some of their hunger and other things. It was nothing to do with COVID. Okay, only the climate was this. But what happened was a TV picked up, one of the TV published that, sorry, they telecast saying that this chicky was the one which was a cure for all. Oh, I had a tough time telling people that that is not the case. But this happened almost 2 months ago, and even today I get some TV reporter asking me, sir, do you have that medicine? Or someone calling me like this. Now, these are the influences which we need to keep in mind to do this. There is another influence which I need to talk about. There were an instance where a very influential politician came around and said that the lighting a candle will drive corona away and kill it. This was done on TV and circulated over a lot of WhatsApp messages as a video. Now, it is very difficult for us science communicators to talk about the facts when an influence like this is overwhelming. And how do we react to that? Dr. Ramanujam said we have several layers of things to tackle, but the COVID has taught me that we have to be a little more aggressive than what we are. So it is not just communicating science, it is not just talking about what we are doing, and we also talk about how this is going to affect the society and what the role of this particular thing in the society. See, if I am talking about a pandemic and how this pandemic will affect the society is something that people should understand. It's not just that if I get a COVID, I die. No, not that. It's not just that if you take this medicine, it cures you. it is just that these medicines are available. These medicines will become available when and why they are not available. All these issues have to be brought to the conscience or brought to the knowledge of the public, of the people. The
Mr.
second
Sharma, I
thing,
mean,
the only one thing that I want to say is that we have been following a principle of what we call as a deficit model, which doesn't work in such situations. I think we need to change. I think Dr. Ramanujam will agree with me.
okay, just one second, Mr.
say
Ramanujam. So,
something.
Mr. Sharma, to what you were saying, I find that, you know, it's not just general rumor mongering. I find that even educated people, they have been saying some really crazy things. Like, I mean, my own mother, you know, sends me messages and says that, you know, beta, you must eat kalonji seeds every day. It will keep COVID away. Things like that. So, I mean, it's really quite rampant, you know, whatever you were saying. I'm sorry, Mr. Ramanujan, you had something to
Yeah, about the question, the earlier question that you raised about reaching the unreached, that we are talking on Zoom and that we are, you know, talking in English. And now, there are two answers that I want to give. One is, like Karishma said, we have to change our ways. It's simply not a matter of COVID-19 and institutions bringing in their resources, doing outreach and so on. I mean, science communication has to take priority in society. I mean, and this communication between India and Bharat has to change. You know, if it is always, you know, science as working in English and you know, translated into languages and going into Tamil or Telugu or whatever, it's not going to work. I mean, science has to be taught and talked in these languages, and there must be a lot of science writing happening in these languages, original science writing, not translations, right? And until that day happens, you're not going to see, because scientific temper, process of science, all that is very important. It's not about communicating facts. This is one. Second is, right now, during this disruption, what do we do? Right? The group that I've been part of, Tamil Nadu Science Forum, part of this People Science Movement groups, have been only, you know, doing physical interaction, right? So through this period, there is no physical interaction, there is lockdown, and what do we do? So we've been using mobile phones, not smartphones, not you know, online platforms, not any of this thing, but mobile phones. So we have a teachers network which has roughly about 2,000 teachers at middle school level in our teachers network, and out of which close to about half of them, so let me put the number as 1,000, who have been taking this idea that 10 children, 10 school children, their families, whose numbers they have, they call once a week, once a day you call, or 2 calls a day, 3 calls a day, and talk to the children and the families, and talk science, talk with the children. So this is possible. Our material, which goes in PDF through smartphones, reaches those teachers, and they call children and talk to them, which we need to do anyway, because the disruption between teachers and children, people talk about online education, but they miss the point that there is a huge disruption of communication between teachers and students, right? So a teacher calling and talking to the students, talking science directly, talking about hand washing, whatever. Of course, it's only a telephone call. So there is no print involved, there is no audio, video, all that is not there. But this is something you can do. So think about it, that if, you know, 50,000 teachers in Tamil Nadu actually are doing it, 5 lakh children are reached. But of course, I'm only talking about 1,000 teachers. That's why I said the numbers that I'm talking about are in thousands, tens of thousands. That's pathetic compared to the need of the country. But these are the methods that we can use, and there must be posters all around. There must be, you know, and that's not something that we are doing, right? I mean, walking around in the slums of Chennai, I find that there are not enough audio messages coming through when you walk, or you know, visual messages on visible for everybody to see. So we are not doing enough of all. I think what we need to do, we are a long way off from. Sorry,
I'm going to pass over to Karishma. Please go ahead.
Go ahead. Is it for me to speak?
I think Ramanujam was done. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I would also take the onus of mainstreaming science communication and outreach on the science community itself, on us. You know, I was at a festival, a conference once, and someone said journalists who blog and tweet are not serious journalists, you know. as opposed to mainstream journalism. Likewise, there is this perception, albeit people won't speak openly, that scientists who do communication, outreach, who are engaged in all such platforms are not serious about science. And given the beast that is India, I think it's a social duty, it's a national duty for us to take our science beyond the bench. We can't say we work within the Indian ecosystem and are so divorced from the reality of the situation around us. So this has to change, and this can only change if there is an institutional and a top-down approach to mainstream science communication, and scientists take the initiative and ownership. This cannot be looked at as something I do in my spare time. There has to be an actual commitment to the cause.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
I have a take there. So science communication here. Yeah, can I?
Okay, sure, because there's a question that is related to what Karishma just said, so I wanted to follow up.
Okay, go ahead.
Ashwini Kumar has asked, we have a question. Ashwini Kumar has asked, many people are engaged in science blogs. How good are these blogs? How good could those blogs be in propagating science and engaging formal science communication? So could you maybe extend your answer to respond to this?
Asking me? Yes. Oh, extremely effective. I have found them to be extremely effective. The scientists just have to take the time out to write them well. And honestly, Mahim, there are so many takers if scientists are ready to put themselves out there and spend a little time on this aspect, and look at it as part of their contribution to society and their career growth. See, in the West, it is incentivized with, you have 20 points for outreach to get tenure. So everyone does some form of diversity outreach, underrepresented minorities, whatever works in the US system. We don't have any such system to incentivize it. So it's also individually driven.
No, which is great, but it's quite democratic, but at the same time, it's not really helping the wider need, right?
Exactly.
I should say I should say the reach of social media or web pages depend upon the language also. Say, for example, in Canada, the reach of any web pages is very little, very minimal. I can give the example of my podcast. I send my podcast over WhatsApp, which reaches roughly around 2,000 people every day. And I also publish this on websites like YouTube, and by someone else publishes it as a YouTube video, and it is also there on Anchor, which the link I have given. But the people who visit Anchor is handful, whereas the response that I get for a good story any day is very much more than what a Anchor subscription gets there. Okay, if 5 people visit Anchor, the responses that I get through WhatsApp for any story is always more than 5 to 6 every day. And that is something different. So I think we need to look at the technology availability or the technology climate in a particular area or particular language. And in India, we cannot do any science communication or any public engagement forgetting the language. I think that's something we need to always keep in mind. And one more issue that Karishma brought about is that the scientists should themselves be doing it. And when the science communication doesn't mean self-propaganda. So this is to be very clear. And that is what in most of the cases that I have found, people would be very much happy if we talk about their science or other science, but they will be unhappy if we talk a little critically about their science. Okay, science communication has to be clearly about science, not the scientist.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I think it really helps to be a little aware of the kind of platforms and the kind of traction they bring in. I think it was fantastic, Mr. Sharma, that you use WhatsApp, which is, it's basically where most Indians go to university. WhatsApp University is where most Indians get their information from. And also you mentioned YouTube, which is actually the most popular social media platform in the country. So both great ideas. At this point, I'm going to segue the discussion into questions. We have a whole lot of questions. I'm going to take a question from Kriti Tripathi. Kriti was saying, we were discussing about, topics on COVID, but she wants to talk about mental disorders and mental health because there are a lot of myths about this. And she says that people don't take things seriously. So Kriti, you are in the room. I'm going to bring you into the conversation. And I want you to ask exactly what you mean by this. When you say there are lots of myths about this, what myths do you think there are about mental health? And why do you think people don't take them seriously? We'd like to hear from you. Unmute yourself, Kriti.
Hello.
Hi, Kriti.
Yeah, hi. Good evening to you all. I really wanted to convey that, like, I knew a person she was going through mental disorder, and she talked about it to her family, but they just took it into a wrong way. They just went for some supernatural things are happening with you. There's nothing about there's nothing called mental disorder or something like that is going on in you. So that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of myths prevailing to this disorders and all.
I can take that, as a doctor. I think this is exactly why even psychiatrists need to be interfacing with the public beyond their capacity as professionals, to bust these myths about all kinds of, mythological, mystical reasons for ailments and conversion therapies and all of that. So, we don't have to be very self-propagatory in this venture when scientists and doctors interface with the public. But there's not, when you have Bollywood people who are celebrities, there's nothing wrong in a scientist who's well known, who's looked up to, who's appreciated, and why not put a face to a scientist? I mean, right? Why not? Absolutely. I mean, I think that would be a great way to communicate. If somebody says, "Arey, wo doctor tha, and I know him, and he said that depression is not a curse. Depression is it's a condition, a pathological condition that can be treated." So, people may call them celebrity scientists, page 3 scientists, whatever it may be. I think they'll serve a purpose in society. Unfortunately, our scientists don't have a face today.
I'm hats off to you. I love what you just said. It's so true. I think somebody who can kind of be, the flag bearer for this is probably what science is. So thank you so much, Kriti, for asking that question and being part of our conversation. We have a lot of other questions as well. There is a person called Aman Konak Modi who's on our call today. He has been asking a whole bunch of questions. A lot of them are very scientific questions. So I've kind of dismissed them, but there is one thing that he has to say which I think merits a mention. He says, "I'm from a village with no internet, no electricity, no paper. When the paper comes, it comes a day late. And in the Hindi paper, there is one page for science, but now we don't even have that." So this is exactly the kind of person that we were discussing. What does somebody like Aman do when he doesn't have access to even the most basic science information? And this is somebody who's seeking that science information. So this is, I wanted to bring that up because it's extremely key. He also says that he finds exams are in English languages. Science, the mode of teaching is in English. If you want to be a scientist, you have to learn English, and these are all things that he feels are extremely difficult to deal with. So, thanks, Aman. We hear you. And he says, I'm not good in English, and this discussion is also in English. Aman, I'm really sorry. I'm really, really sorry about that. It's true. This is unfortunately the nature of the beast. We've been brought up in this school system, and we study in this language, and so we have to give our exams in this language, and then we end up working in this language. So it does seem for right now, it is a bit of a vicious cycle. And I really wish I had something more to tell you and something a little more uplifting, but maybe you should listen to Mr. Sharma, who has great answers. So Aman, I hope you're still here. Please listen.
Aman, understanding science doesn't need a language. It needs your intellect and the way, the logics that you can do. But it is read and communicated through languages. Okay, that is the only issue. You can, without English also, you can learn science. That is not a big deal. But then each language, say why we scientists speak in these languages, we have several languages in science. Okay, biology has a language, physics has a language, and maybe the medicine has a language. So it is not English. So don't worry about that. Once you get into any particular field, you will learn that language. So as long as you learn the principles of science, I think that is a great thing. Forget the words. Words are not the ones. It is the total concept that you need to understand. And unfortunately, our textbooks focus more on words, and that is one of the pity, but we can always overlook that. I studied in a Kannada medium, and later took on English, and I still have. And I also faced a sort of a mental stress at a time, and I had to go to a psychiatrist. I don't hesitate about that, because yes, we need to do that many times.
Thanks so much for that, Mr. Sharma. In fact, we have another question. I'm going to direct this question to you. It's by an anonymous attendee who asks, is it a good idea to encourage vernacular approach in science when most of the formal science is heavily discussed in English today already? Sometimes translating scientific concepts in regional language becomes too hard.
Well, when I say translation, translating the concepts is not difficult, because all our experiences, the senses are the same. Okay, and certain concepts of science are beyond our senses. That is where we get into a problem of representing them as metaphors in different languages. And that can always be done. If I say that Sharma, say, if you call this person as a Sharma, you can give a different name also. It doesn't matter. So as long as we understand that this is the concept, there should not be a difficulty in understanding that. And so generally what happens is that communicating science in regional languages means people think of only translating from one text to another text. That is not the thing. You understand the science and then you talk about that in your language. It can be a colloquial, a dialect also. That should not stop. And we have experimented with our Janasuti in carrying some episodes in different dialects, and it has not stopped people in reaching out to us. So this is something that we need to understand and say that yes, English is not absolute necessity to do science or to understand science. But yes, to communicate science among the scientists who work in the same this one, maybe you need some English. That I agree with you.
Okay, I've invited Sai Baba into the conversation. I think he's a colleague to many of us. Sai Baba, why don't you go ahead and read out what it is that you shared with us?
Yeah, so good evening to all of you. It's nice listening to all of you, and you discussed important issues. But one aspect which has been worrying to me is that with social media becoming accessible to many, the information that is being available to people is too large. It's a cluttering of information. And now this is a new challenge to science communicators. And my question is, or my worry is, that how do we stand out to reach out effectively in such a situation we are in now? Of course, the importance of communicating in vernacular language has already been emphasized, but how do we stand out in the large amount of heaps of information that is becoming available?
Can I?
So I think we're looking at how to be clutter breaking, and
Can
I think, Ramanujam, you want to answer that question?
Yeah. One thing that we have been trying to do is to specialize science communication material for specific classes of persons and specific needs. And I think that helps understand what Dr. Sai Baba was referring to and address that. Like, for instance, we have got a whole lot of material for shopkeepers. Right? If you're running a small shop, then during COVID-19, how do you react? What do you do? What are the things that you should take care of? We have got material for delivery persons. If you're working in Swiggy or whatever, what do you do? And so this is the. I'm just giving a couple of examples here. From ISRC, I have personally been interacting with the Retailers Association of India, talking to them whether the material for shopkeepers is something that they can use their channels to put out and reach. So the response was very good. So what I'm trying to say is that science communication, if it can address more specific, like mental caregivers. If you're what do you do for if you're a caregiver in a crowded locality? We took some particular, in fact, slum in Chennai as a model and talked about what a caregiver should do in this particular context. So specializing the messages as much as possible, I think really helps. We talked about mental health in the case of children, and what talking to parents about mental health in this context, or parents of small children, we have separate sections on that. taking care of elderly and mental health, separate section on that. I think this is one way. I mean, there is, of course, no general answer to what you're saying, but this is, I think, that's something that we are trying to do.
I want to actually add something to what Professor Ramanujam said as well, Sai Baba. I think with science communication in a country like ours, we spoke about the huge disparities in this country and the dichotomies that exist. And I think it really is trial and error for the most part. I think we really need to just try different things and see what works and look at then implementing that across new audiences, new languages, and things like that. Because that's my experience of what seems to work. So, so thank you very much, and thanks so much for joining us on this question. The next question is from Vanshika Singh. So Vanshika, you're in the room. Why don't you ask your question and share what it is that you wanted to share?
Hi, thanks for bringing me in, Mayan. So when we were having this discussion about reaching out to the masses and people who are not very well versed with English, I was just reminded of one of my recent contributions to COVID-Gyan, where I had a conversation with a public health expert who's Dr. Yogeshwar Kalikonde, and he's in an area that's called Gadchiroli in Maharashtra, and it's a very far-fetched area. And for a long time, it remained one of the only districts in Maharashtra, which we all know is quite, deep into the pits of COVID. That was the only district that remained COVID-free for a long time. Now it has some because of the whole migration and the migrant workers coming in. So I had a conversation with him and we put it out for everybody to read. But all I was thinking about was, and also some people reached out to me saying, well, this is a great work, but but the real audience of this is the people who will not be able to reach through the medium that you are writing this and the platform that it's on. And so I talked to a few people and tried to see how we can sort of get through this. And they suggested something very simple. And I think it's very timely to sort of get back to those roots of communication where we would, reach out to the masses through radio platforms and more accessible sorts of communication. So if we could, translate these COVID resources that are coming on with only in English and coming on in such numbers, and if you could take the relevant ones and translate them into more vernacular languages and put it out on radio shows and everything, that would be great, I feel. So that was what I had to say.
So I'll just say one thing. With a population of 1.3 billion and the diversity and hard to reach, we are nowhere close to saturating science communication in India, So we are right now in the more the merrier phase. Let's be out there. Yeah, I don't think we have to worry about that.
Absolutely. Mr. Sharma, just 1 second. Vanshika has written something and she's looking at having that translated into different languages and maybe having it being converted to a radio segment. That link is in the chat window. And yes, Mr. Sharma, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, Vanshika's idea is good. So we have already been doing this in Kannada, especially Janasuddhi is talking to scientists over the phone, okay, and having interviews and then distributing it through WhatsApp. Not only this, Janasuddhi is also broadcast on community radios. I am not talking about All India Radio, not FM, not Red FM or Big FM. Okay, they are big. So we would like to go for these community radios, which are always looking for a lot of contents. And if we can provide content, ready created contents to the community radios, it will be a very good approach to reach a lot of people. But there are two things. One, you have to be aware of the language that they use, and then second thing is the audio format that you use. Okay, these are two things that we can always learn. And my experience has been, especially during the last eclipse, we carried a series of episodes on solar eclipse during December 26. And what happened was, one day morning, I received a call from a very remote village from a girl. She says that you were on radio. I said, which radio? She quoted the community radio, and she said she was scared about going out because she was pregnant. And then I had to tell her, this is just like a shadow. So Do you go to a shadow somewhere if you are out in the street? She said, yes. And then why don't you go here also? So we could talk to them and convince. The other experience was on the day of the eclipse, early morning. And when we were trying to watch the eclipse, I get a call from a Bagalkot, which is about 600 kilometers from Mysore, from a teacher. He says, we have a problem here. The clouds are there, so I am not able to, sorry, the sunglasses have not come, which we have ordered. So I'm not able to show this eclipse to the children here. So how do I do this? So this is a fantastic way that, I got a response for the audio communication, and we can reach to people. The tools that are available, the technology is not very high. The technology is amenable to us, many of these things. The only thing that we need to look at is how do we use which technology and where, and it is possible.
Thanks a lot, Vanshika. We're going to now bring Ashwini Kumar. Ashwini has a couple of things to say and to ask. So Ashwini, you are unmuted. Go ahead.
Good evening, all panelists. This was a nice talk, I felt. My first question is that we have a society called Indian Science Communication Society, which also has a one-year fellowship program for those who are interested in science communication. So my question is, how beneficial could that program be? Secondly, how that society can get engaged with universities so that this science communication can be officially propagated for beneficial effects of that.
So, I mean, to be very honest, this is the first time I'm hearing of this society and this fellowship.
It is there, ma'am. I have searched that. Yeah, and last year in July or August, they came out with a notification to apply for that program. There's a society.
I think, Mahin, you'd be better off answering this as a science communicator, but we need more of such programs if there are there. You know, we shouldn't have to mention that there was just one. We need many more.
Absolutely. I haven't heard of this either, but tell us more about it, Ashwini.
Ma'am, it's as far as I've searched the website, it's a registered society, and it provides a one-year fellowship, and the fees for that one-year program is around 2,000 or 4,000 for that one-year program, and they hold various workshops also with science communication. And I think if there is some kind of program running in our country, we can definitely get benefited out of that. And if those societies can, repeating that, if those societies can get engaged with universities formally and officially, we can perhaps propagate the beneficial effect of science communication.
I mean, I like the idea. I like what you have to say, but I think it really is up to the Indian Science Communication Society to make that move. There are a lot of independent science communicators that don't necessarily graduate with any kind of fellowship or diploma or degree or anything. And I really believe that you don't have to be a scientist to be a science communicator, but I do think that you do need to be a communicator to communicate science.
Definitely.
So, yeah, that's what I think. So I mean, so thank you so much for your question, Ashwini. Is there anybody who had anything to say to Ashwini?
Yeah, there was one program by DST earlier, National Council for Science, Technology and Communication, where scientists could take a fellowship and go to a media house and stay there for a year. And similarly, media houses could also send people to the research institutions. But this program never took off in the way that it was supposed to be. And I think the program might still be there, but no takers.
Okay, great, thanks. We have a next question from Kanya. Kanya, I've enabled you in the room, so would you like to ask your question, please? Kanya, would you like to ask your question? Okay, hello, Kanya, are you there? Okay, in the meanwhile, Murli Krishna wants to know, is there any freelance writer contributed science content platform online? That's a mouthful. But basically, is there any content platform online to which a freelance writer could contribute? And I mean, to the best of my understanding, I think almost every science website will be very happy to take on freelance content, because we're always, I mean, at least I can speak for the Bangalore Life Science Cluster. We're always looking for fresh voices to lend to the research that we want to talk about, popular science. So pretty much anything. And I mean, if you are a freelance writer and you want to write for various websites, just reach out to the communications office of those institutes and just let them know that you're interested in contributing. And yeah, I'm sure there's work. There's always something to write about.
So I know in the biology space, there is India Bioscience, which does reach out to the community. Another one is Nature India solicits articles from the community as well. And it's another option.
So there's also the Daily O, there's Medium, there's Scroll. So you can check out all of those. Kanya, I don't know whether you want to ask this question or not, but you're in the room. Let me know if you want to ask.
I want to answer it anyway. I just started typing answer to Kanya, but when you called.
Go ahead.
So,
let me just ask the question. I'll ask the question, yeah. Kanya says, I would agree to the speakers and I want to add to their thoughts how very important it is to communicate and learn science. I would suggest to the other people or students, it's just an effort with more effective and efficient study to learn and very importantly to question. That's how we learn science. To move out in the field of science, it is to imbibe in a particular subject, interest one should habituate and make the change in developing science and make it more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree more with what she's saying, in the sense that the central problem is, I was earlier talking about how our classrooms, we don't talk science. In fact, our classrooms, what we learn in terms of science is only facts and knowledge and a certain, maybe a few skills in handling experiments. But the process of science, in scientific exploration, scientific investigation, testing whether something is true or not. I mean, right now we're talking about hoax busting, right? I mean, ideally this should be part of science education, right? When you look at a proposition, some antennae should start vibrating, right? I mean, do you think this is making a conjecture? If you think this is nonsense, is it good? Is it something that you want to believe in? These are processes that are really lacking in science. I must say that making that as part of education is perhaps the biggest challenge. And it's not about learning science, doing science, and then going out and communicating science. We can all feel very good about it. I think it's terrible that we have to do it that way at all. In fact, on the contrary, if we should be only thinking about what science education should mean. And when I'm talking about science education here, I mean from elementary stage to PhD, everywhere. A classroom where there is no conversation is no classroom at all. How can science be taught in a way people do not question, people do not discuss, people do not argue? I must say a silent science classroom is the death of science. And unless we acknowledge that, I think a whole lot of other stuff that we are talking is, I mean, pandemics will come and go. Somebody said, hey, you're supposed to talk about the new normal. What is the new normal, right? I mean, it will be very easy for us to get back to very bad habits. Let me be very sure. We have bad habits, we will get back to them. It's about changing what we understand as education. Spanish flu was 1918. We lost millions. It's not that we had warnings from history, right? But bad habits are very easy to get back to. Science, it's very easy to get back after this classroom where you start working about cube roots and d by dx of this and that, and it's the new, that is the normal. What new normal? It is the old perennial normal, right?
I'm really glad that you brought up the point of the new normal, Professor Ramanujam, and we need to close up the session really quickly. So just as closing remarks, I want to ask each of our guests here, give me one do and one don't for science communication as part of the new normal. So let's begin with you, Mr. Sharma.
Yeah, No, I am not a know-all. This is the first thing that I would like to tell everyone. The second thing that is
no. Okay, no. Okay.
no. The second thing is, of course, we need to understand that sometimes logic fails before faith. So these two issues we need to keep in mind, and then only we need to go forward in engagement.
That's great advice, Mr. Sharma. But where's the do and where's the don't?
That's the
So
do and
don't
that's the
assume you
do.
know everything. Don't assume you know everything. That's the
Yes,
don't. What's the
yes. And
What's the
don't take on the faith, all of a sudden without preparation.
That's two don'ts. I need one do and one don't.
Okay, do take on the faith and the beliefs and the mates with proper preparation. Is that okay?
Thank you. That's great. Thanks so much for being with us today. Professor Ramanujam, what about you? What is your one do and your one don't for the new normal?
One do is insist on evidence-based decision-making in public life.
Right.
The don't, do not accept a politics or a public discourse that ignores data and evidence.
Excellent. Super. And I will end with Dr. Kaushik. Please tell us one do and one don't.
So I'm going to cater to the young group of Indian students and researchers who potentially may want to think of science communication. They're seeing it. I would say it's very simple. Do communicate and don't hesitate. Very simple. Very simple.
You make rhyme. One do and one don't.
One
do
don't.
come to our Sundowner sessions. Do check out the COVID-Gyan website. Do keep in touch with us, and do keep your eyes open for the next session. That's four do's, and don't forget to write to us and let us know what you thought about this session as well. I want to thank our three guests. Thank you so much. It was such an interesting session. There is so much food for thought. I think no matter how much you know about science communication, there's always something new to learn. And I figure that out every time I have a conversation. And I have promised the three of you that I will take you out for drinks. I will keep my promise when we meet. I will.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, everybody, for attending.
Thanks.
Thank you.